Hello and welcome back to the shed. In today's episode we're going to sharpen the plane blade in the Stanley number 5 that we restored in the last video. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link in the description below. So as the intro said, today we're going to be sharpening this plane blade and setting up and fitting the cap iron for this number 5 hand plane that we restored in the last video. Now I've got a few different things here that I use when I'm doing this. You probably notice that I'm going to be using the power today. This is a Tormek. It's a whetstone grinder. Yes, it's quite expensive, but I restore a lot of hand planes, as you can see here. So I've got the Tormek to make the job easier for me. I like the whetstone grinder, so that's what I use. Now, I use this for squaring off the edge of the blades if I need to and resetting the primary bevel. I don't use secondary bevels. A lot of people might, and sometimes you end up with secondary bevels when you come off the wheel and onto some stones. So you can do all of this work on stones if you want, but I like to speed the process up and use the whetstone grinder. I have some water stones here, just some cheap King water stones, I believe they were. The other thing I have down here is that Atoma diamond plate that I got from Japanese Tools here in Australia. I use this one. This is a 400 grit. I use this one for flattening my whetstones, and I also use it for heavy removal of stock. These here are DMT plates. I got them recommended by a YouTuber when I first started, and these are the fine and super fine plates. I did have a coarse one and I found that didn't stay flat. The only downside to these are that they are very heavy. I use, obviously this coarse one, I use for flattening my stones and coarse removal, and I use these fine and super fine ones so I don't dig gouges into my whetstones. How do we go about sharpening? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cap iron off. We'll sort the cap iron out later. We'll work on the blade first. Perfectly sharp is the coming together of two planes to make a sharp edge. So we want two flat edges coming together, and that'll give us the sharpening edge that we're looking for. Whoever used this plane last has ended up putting quite a large back bevel on the back here, and it comes through a good 2 or 3 millimeters on the back here, which means that getting the back of this blade flat is going to be very hard. So what I'm going to do is remove that area using the Tormek to start with. I'll come in flat and just remove all of that material out before I sharpen. So I'm all set up here now. So the idea is I'm going to hold the blade as square as I can. You can come in and reference it like this if you really want to make sure it's square. It doesn't matter too much. Now all I'm going to do, bring it forward like this, keep touching and checking the back of the blade until I've taken off the amount of material that I wish to. So as you can see here now, I've taken it back off and this is really flat through here now. And then keep even pressure right across the blade like this. Push down, and we're moving just as far as we need to, so we're actually covering the whole stone and we don't leave a little ridge on the edge of the stone. I like to run some marker pen on the back. Coming in about 1 centimeter there. That's just so I can see what I'm doing. Now we'll place it on and we'll work it back and forwards about 8, 9, 10 times. And what we've got here is a shiny spot where we've hit, and it's still dull on all these spots. So what this indicates is that from this spot here, this area angles down. So we're going to have to keep working until this comes up to the edge. Now, if that takes too long and we have a problem, we might have to go ahead and use the ruler trick. But I only reserve the ruler trick for blades that are not going to flatten out properly, because I find that if you put the time in and you get it flat, you'll never have to flatten it again. With the ruler trick, you got to use it every time. You have to remember to use it every time. And I just find that it's a little bit lazy not to go all the way and actually properly flatten your blade. So I'm spreading my fingers along the edge again, keeping it flat, holding my fingers there, and then just guiding it with the back two fingers here. This is the process of flattening, and with the really bad blades, it could take hours, or it could be as much as 5 minutes. If you don't have a diamond plate to do this, you can use a flat board like some melamine, have some sandpaper on it, and work it on there just like when I flattened the bottom of the handplane. Flattening the back of most of these blades is the worst part, and is the most time-consuming part of probably the whole restoration. So now I've finished getting the back of this blade flat. I'll bring you in and just show you in a sec. It took me about 20 minutes to get this one flat. It was in quite a bad shape, to be honest. So as you can see here, it's very shiny, and I don't know if you can see it here, but we've got bare metal right from corner to corner. So right up into this far corner, right into this far corner here, it's running all the way along, and that's why we used the marker pen before, so we can actually see that as we were working. But on some of these old dirty ones, you don't need the marker pen because you can clearly see where it's got to. Before I move on and actually sharpen the bevel and put it into my Veritas honing jig here, what I like to do is just roll the corners off so you don't get the tram tracks. Some people like cambers. I don't like to use cambers. I find that it affects the work of the plane, and that's just what I find. Other people like doing it other ways, so they can do it other ways. So I know this technique of rolling the corners is a technique that I've seen Paul Sellers use. I know he likes it. I know most of the makers on YouTube seem to like a camber. We bring this down until you feel the bevel touch like this. You can actually feel it front back. Because it's come off the Tormek, it's a concave cut on the blade, so there's two distinct points, one at the back and one at the front. So it actually caves it. It's not a flat bevel, which I'm going to flatten it out by using the honing guide later on. So I bring it in like that, feel for the bevel, and then lift it 3 times. Then the same on the other side. Don't know if you can see it, but it's rolled these corners out of the way. And now we'll do the same on the fine and superfine plates here, just to refine that a little bit. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen the blade. I like to use a honing guide. Some people like to freehand, but what I'm going to do is use the guide because that's my preferred method. So I'll just show you a close-up of how we use this. Pretty much, I'm set to the yellow dot up here, yellow markings on the guide here, set to 30 degrees. You get a little fence here when you put the blade in. Then you whack the blade in like this, bevel side towards you when it's upside down. Loosely lock the side that's got the little fence area here. Make sure the blade's pushed in tight against that. Then lock the other one down. Make sure everything's locked off. And square to it, remove the fence. I have these stones here. Now, these are king stones. They're cheap, but they cut fairly fast, and they do seem to stay quite flat, I've found. And to keep them flat, I flatten them nearly every time I use them by the process of just using one of these carpenter's pencils making a grid shape, and then you come on with the stone. Make sure to keep it wet and keep them soaking. Wipe them back, and it was that simple. It's flat. It's simply a process of coming in here, spreading your fingers evenly across, and then moving back and forwards. Now, the best way to do this is just to keep moving and keep feeling until you feel a burr right the way across. If you're not confident in doing it that way, what we can do is use the marker pen, run it across, and back on here. I like the bevel to be square right the way across and not just more on one side and less on another. I like the whole thing to be flat right the way across. So I'm going to go in this initial sharpening until it's right the way across, and with subsequent sharpenings, it's much faster, it's much quicker, it's much easier, because you're already at the angle you need, and you just come in and work it straight away. So it's really quick. You don't spend much time on any of the stones, especially if you're just doing a touch-up sharpen. Now, after I've sharpened it this way, if I get a nick in the edge of the blade, I'll go back to the Tormek. Otherwise, I will just continue to sharpen it by hand like this. So, I don't know if you can see this, but it's sharpened. It's gone right through to the bottom here, and less on this side. So I'm going to go until this is even right the way across and all that marker's gone. With these whetstones, it's important to continually turn them. So I'll do 20 strokes going this way, and because this side's not getting worn, and this will help to keep it flat, I will then regularly turn it every 20 strokes or so, just to help. And I'm also moving it back and forwards to try and just work the entire surface of the stone. We're going full thickness right the way across, and you can feel a little wire burr on the back. This is the 800 grit. Squirt it down, place it on here like this, and then push it down. Make sure you keep it flat so you don't undo all your flat work. Now that was just removing the burr from the previous grit. Ten strokes I usually find does it. You have a little thin wire burr. Now, a lot of hand tool woodworking and that wire burr I'm talking about, there's a lot of sensors involved to touch with things. And then we'll come up to the 1200, get rid of the burr. And this time I won't put the marker. Now it's going to be impossible for you to see for you to actually see this wire burr, but that's not quite gone right across. You're literally just feeling for a little bit of a scrape on the back of your finger. Fine burr all the way across, and on this is the last grit I use. I come in and remove that. 5 strokes, remove the burr, 2 strokes, remove the burr, 1 stroke back and forwards, remove your burr. So what I have here is the strop that I've made. You can buy a strop, but they're expensive, so you're actually cheaper to try and get a off-cut of leather. And I've just got this glued down to a piece of MDF. You can glue it down to any substrate. and keep the rough side up. Now, this is charged with honing compound. I use this green Josco's one because the standard chromium oxide ones that you buy from the woodworking shops are pretty expensive. It'll last a long time, but this is just the Josco green one from Bunnings, and I've found that it works very well. So you literally just rub it on like I did then. Find some way to hold it. I like to clip it down in the vise, like so. We'll remove the blade from the guide, pulling it forward so we don't touch this edge. And now what I'm going to do is, so you can come down and you can sort of feel for the angle, and then you're pulling back. Now I'm going to do it like this about 20 times. And we can see that that is starting to shine up. Now I'll go 50, 60 times if I want. You just need to be careful in doing this that you don't lift it up too far and roll your edge over. So I'm sort of rocking from my shoulders just so I keep the angle that I had. And then when it comes up shiny like this, I move to the back. Do the same. About 50 times. More if you feel you need to. And then I'll do 5 this side. 5 this side. 3, 2, 1, 1. And just remove any built up paste that sort of sits around here. The stropping process also prevents this blade from being damaged by rust again. And to check it, you can hold it like this, and you're just looking for it to just grab your nail. I know some people cut their hairs with it, paper. It's not necessary. Just see if it wants to grab your nail. It's nice and sharp. If it's not sharp enough, it won't grab your nail. Just be very, 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 very careful, and it's just very, very light touches and you'll feel it grab. Now you have the blade sharpened. Put the blade to the side, bevel side up out of your way so you're not going to knock it. Now we're going to work on the chip breaker. Now these chip breakers need a little relief angle here so you know that this point is going to come down dead flat. So what I'm going to do to start with is actually just work on the top. So you bring it up to the angle that it's actually currently on, which is quite a steep angle, and just working it on the round. This is going to make sure that when the chip hits the breaker, it's going to roll over it and not impede it. The other thing you can do is actually sit it on the top of the round and lift it up. So as you pull back, you're lifting. Now we're going to add a little relief on the bottom here. So we have the very edge point. That's what's going to make contact with our blade. So we are just having the single point of contact ensures that it's going to be much easier to match it to the back of the blade and make sure there's no gaps on the back of the blade. What we're doing right here is we're going to keep it within, or as close as we can, to about 1/2 centimetre on the edge of the stone and keep it rested on the blade. And then we're just going to move it back like this. And this is going to keep the angle the same because we're keeping it right on that edge. And with it right on that edge, it allows us to get that relief angle as well. They've got shiny metal right the way across. I'll just do a couple more for good measure. And then we'll move through the grits. Okay, now that we've got that bright and clear across, you feel if you've got a burr here, and if you haven't, then go back and keep working this top edge back onto the superfine stone and just remove that burr. What you can see here is, yeah, there's still a flat rough spot here, but this is smooth. That first transition right through to there, that's what counts. You can keep going and smooth all of this out, but we'll smooth some of that out on the strop. So the same process we're doing on the stones, we do here on the strop. Now I like to run my finger right across like that, keeps the even pressure. Start on the ridge, pull it up. It's come off nice and shiny now. And it's given a little slight burr there, so I just pull back there a few times till it's gone. So now we've set the chip breaker. We've got that already, we need to put it together. So we cross it like this, push it up, turn it around, make sure that screw's got a little bit of tension on it, and we push it right up to the edge. Now, we can keep the chip breaker about 1.5 millimeters back from the edge. You can be further back, but 1.5 millimeters is where I tend to go. And then you double check, which I'm not going to be able to show you on the camera. You look through the gap of your chip breaker and your blade against a light. If you see any light peering through, you go back to your stones until you get it to fit without any light. If there's any light coming through there, there is a gap coming through. If you've got no light, you've got no gap, and it should work perfectly. Now that we've got the blade all set, we're ready to put it in the plane and start adjusting the plane to get a nice square, even shaving. What I've got here is the plane body, the plane blade, a lever cap, and I've got a piece of wood here that's already square. Now we're going to use that piece of wood to help in making sure that our blade is actually taking a flat square shaving. So first we pop the blade in, make sure it's pulled right up, drop the lever cap in, so make sure that's pushed in there, and now we can see that that's located in there and it's moving. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move to the piece of wood. Now the idea here is we'll keep moving it on here until we start taking a shaving, and then you'll move over to one side and then the other side, and what you're looking for is the same thickness shaving in the throat. So right down in here you're looking for the shaving to come off, for it to be the same thickness and even, and you'll slightly adjust the lateral adjuster until you have that happen. Okay, so what we're going to do is we hold it down, press it in the front, and we start pushing, and we're turning the lateral adjuster screw here as we're moving until the blade protrudes enough to just hit. Now I got that there. Hit that side, hit that side. Now I'm going to retract that a little bit because it's a little too thick. I'm still going to alright, it's not taking it. So we move it very gently. And I'm checking both sides as we're moving across. So we're starting to get a very fine shaving there, which means it's cutting heavier on that side. What we do is when we get it heavy like that, we push it slightly towards it. So we're pushing towards the side it's cutting heavy. Little tiny bit each time. So we're actually taking fairly similar shavings. It's just a little touch further to the heavy side. A little bit more. So you just keep judging it. Alright, those shavings are about the same. So we have that one and that one. They're about the same thickness. This one's just breaking up a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is back it off just a touch again. Because this time, because it's square, we can get a much finer shaving. So that's the shaving from the middle. Shaving from the right. Shaving from the left. So I'm going to back that off again. And I'm looking for the finest shaving I can get. So we're getting a little feather shaving there. Little feather shaving there now. Same shaving that side, so I'm now convinced that this is nice and square. So there you have it. That's how you sharpen the blade, flatten the back, set the cap iron to make sure it's making full contact across the blade, and then fit it to your plane and adjust it so you're taking a nice square shaving. And that's all there is to it. So I just want to thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.